Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Lagerquist. We're here at Vine Faith in Action in Mankato today to talk about some caregiving information. With us, we've got Kelly McDonough from the Minnesota River Valley Agency on Aging, and she will be ably assisted, I'm sure, by Brittany Johnson, who is from the Senior LinkAge line, another source of information that we turn to regularly here at Vine to help make sure that we're getting the information that our members and friends need to know. So at this point, I'm just going to step aside and let Kelly take over our presentation. There you go, Kelly.
Great, thank you so much, Mike. As Mike said, my name is Kelly McDonough. I work for Minnesota River Area Agency on Aging. We are your local aging experts and resource for any questions that you might have regarding the need for assistance and services, and Brittany will cover that a little bit later in our presentation. But today what we want to talk about is caregiving. And so on that note, I'm going to open up our slides. We do have a slide presentation here. So let me bring that up. Okay. The other names that you will see on here are Betty Christensen and Molly Peterson. Minnesota River Area Agency on Aging covers actually 27 counties. And of those 27 counties, each of the program developers, one of which is myself, covers 9 counties, which certainly includes Blue Earth County. Our objectives in today's presentation is to define caregiving, understand the value of caregiving, talk about the benefits of resources that can support caregiving, and how to access those resources that support caregiving. This is the area, the Southwest Planning and Service area that Minnesota River Area on Agency covers. And I'm going to say, if you catch me changing this, because Minnesota River Area Agency on Aging becomes a mouthful. So if you catch me shortening that, the foreign language is MNRAA. That is the foreign language that we use. And I thought this was kind of a nice graphic. It focuses on aging as a continuous process. We all are aging continually, which also implies that we change. And this is a dynamic process that includes positive aspects at every stage. If you want more information about aging and reframing aging, I would encourage you to look up the frameworksinstitute.org. Frameworksinstitute.org, great resource. I'm going to flip my camera off here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the demographics of older adults in our in the MNRAA service area. And actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to talk about our Southwest Planning Service area. As I said, MNRAA covers 27 counties, and we each program developer serves 9. At MNRAA, our work is to help older adults thrive. We believe that older adults thrive when they are supported to maintain the lifestyle of their choice. In 1965, Congress signed into law the Older Americans Act, otherwise known as the OAA, which was established through the Administration on Aging and resulted in the creation of units on aging, including the Minnesota Board on Aging, to oversee area agencies on aging, of which there are 7 in the state of Minnesota. MNRAA is a catalyst in building communities where older adults can live with dignity, mutual respect, and shared responsibilities across generations and across cultures. We provide administration of funds under the Older Americans Act, which, by the way, was recently reauthorized this past fall. And one of the examples of how those Older Americans Act dollars come to each of the area agencies, one of the greater benefits of that and beneficiaries of that is the support of home delivered meals. We develop services in communities where gaps exist. And again, we're talking about gaps that keep older adults, that inhibit their ability to remain in their homes. We provide information and assistance through the Senior LinkAge line. And that's something, again, Brittany's going to talk about. And we advocate for older adults at the local, state, and federal levels. Today, we want to focus on ensuring that adults are successful at caregiving. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our statistics here. Does anyone, what of our participants, this is a question, anyone know how many people per day in the United States are turning 65? Who would like to speak up and hazard a guess?
I will estimate and say 12,000.
Well, you are very close, just a little over, but the answer, the last time that we put this data together was 10,000 adults each day are turning 65. And 1 out of every 5 people in Minnesota, out of every 1 in 5, how many are over the age of 65? And the answer to that is 3. So you can see how significant these numbers are. Do you think that there are more people of color over 65 or between the ages of 18 and 64 in Minnesota?
I would say younger.
That would be correct. The significance of these numbers is that we have more people of color in the younger age group, and this has implications for how they choose to provide caregiving. Many cultures tend to access outside services less and are much more family oriented and dependent upon the family. And I would anticipate for those of you who work professionally with caregivers, particularly those of you who are here from Vine, are well aware of those kind of statistics. And then also the number of people in Minnesota ages 65 to 74 that were still employed prior to COVID is approximately 25%. So that's kind of a surprising number. I think that that has significant implications also for the fact that we have older adults who choose to work because it continues to provide them with a sense of purpose. They have great expertise to be sharing with younger colleagues. And there are those who have been more significantly impacted by COVID because they perhaps do not have good pension plans or no pension plans at all, rely heavily on Social Security, and therefore they were employed typically on a part-time basis to supplement their income. So COVID's had a great impact on them. And then again, pre-COVID, Minnesota ranked 4th in the nation for the number of people over the age of 65 who volunteer. And so that is 36%. Minnesota is one of the top ranking states for volunteerism. So we've been very fortunate with that. And now Mike is going to help us with just a very under 3-minute video here on you might be caregiving if.
Okay, you'll need to stop your sharing before I can.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
All righty, let's see what we can do here. All right, it's a good start. And here we go.
Did you know that there are more than 65 million Americans who are taking care of their vulnerable loved ones, and many don't even consider themselves a caregiver?
That is so true. I've been taking care of my wife for more than 20 years before I figured out that one.
Well, you always were a little bit slow.
Clearly. Look, Jeff's been helping people learn their true identities for 3 decades. And since November is National Caregivers Month, we decided to get together and help you figure out if you indeed might be a caregiver.
That's right.
And I'm sorry, it'll probably freeze up, but the audio does continue.
Okay.
That's right. And I've been talking to your wife. I think I have this one down. If you are adept at opening doors with your butt so you can pull a wheelchair, you might be a caregiver.
If you start dividing your M&Ms into a pill box, chances are you're a caregiver.
If you were on a first name basis with a hospital security guard, see you tomorrow, Earl, you might be a caregiver.
If you've ever used neosporin as a verb,
Do it.
hold still, baby. I got a neosporin this so we get to church on time.
If you've ever hooked up your dog to your wife's wheelchair just to see if it would work, please tell me you have not done this one.
I might have some video.
Really?
Yeah,
I want to see it.
if you can remember your parents' social security number, but can't remember your own. you're probably a caregiver.
If a hospital bed has not hampered your love life,
She's had 78 surgeries over 30 years. Do you know how many nights we have spent in the hospital?
no sense wasting a semi-private room. And since the holidays are upon us, if you've ever changed a dressing while cooking turkey with dressing, you might be a caregiver.
You know, the best part is these are all true stories. And if you got one to share, share it on. We want to hear it. On a serious note, I've been a caregiver since the Cold War. I know how important it is to laugh and to connect with others, and I'm proud to be working with AARP. They have so many resources to help you deal with the challenges of taking care of your loved ones. And just as important, how to take care of yourself. You got to bring your A game to the table.
That's right. And you might not be a caregiver now, but you'll likely be one or need one someday. So pay extra special attention to the people you see pushing that wheelchair or taking mama to the doctor or changing that dressing. They need your encouragement, your love, and your laughter.
Absolutely. So folks, have a great holiday season. Be safe, be well,
And behave. For caregiving resources and information, visit aarp.org/caregiving. And if you've got a caregiver to thank, give them a shout out at thanksproject.org.
Oh, I don't know if I'm back on here.
We did hear you.
Okay, so any takeaways, any surprising takeaways from that video or any responses? What we like about that short video is that it demonstrates some humor, and all of caregiving is not so fun. To varying degrees, it can cause some stress, but caregiving also can be a joy, and as a coping mechanism, one of the best things that we can do is to find some humor also in caregiving. You know, one of the stories that I like to tell is that when my dad was at his end of life and was using a walker, which I had gotten from the loan closet at Nicollet County, it had bright fluorescent yellow tennis balls on it. Well, my Patty dog plays with tennis balls. And so my father and I had a really great laugh because Patty dog was insistent that those were his tennis balls, but they weren't rolling around free for him to play with. We had a good laugh, and that's a good memory for me that I will always hang on to. So I want to say that, you know, caregiving is something that we evolve into. It can happen suddenly due to a health incident, or it can be something that starts out fairly innocuous and increases. So that's a part of the point of the video. But the other part of the video is to really highlight that there are many people who do not identify that they're a caregiver. And there's lots of reasons behind that, but even some of the most basic tasks for helping a neighbor, a family member, a friend can be considered caregiving. I want to reference here the Rosalind Carter quote. You know, it's been in my mind for many, many years. However, I will say that it is also, it's out there pretty frequently. So I would not be surprised if you've not seen it before. But, you know, she said it first and Rosalind said it best. There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, or those who will be caregivers. So I think that that's the significance of caregiving in our culture, is we will fall in one of those categories. And in that context, what we want to emphasize is that caregiving is not a singular, it's not an activity that a person does alone. It is a best activity when it is shared with others. The value of caregiving is, it's invaluable. There is such great significance to that. According to AARP, there are an estimated 640,000 Minnesotans who are caring for an older or a disabled adult. Those numbers do not even consider the caregiving that happens that occur with children and youth. In the United States, about 41 million unpaid caregivers provide an estimated 34 billion hours of care, which is worth $470 billion which is worth $470 billion. And this care goes to parents, spouses, partners, and friends. And the statistics came from 2017. We're going to talk a little bit about what the value of caregiving is and what is caregiving. Caregiving may include something as simple as buying and delivering groceries. It could be ordering groceries. I will say that thanks to COVID, I think we're going to see some positive outcomes. And one of those is that there are now shoppers at the stores so that individuals have the opportunity to place their order and have them delivered, or just to place their grocery order and do a drive-through and pick them up. So there are some advantages, particularly for the caregiver in this context, but helping with homemaking tasks, which would include meal preparation, laundry, cleaning, some of that light housekeeping tasks, assisting with paying with bills or sorting through mail. Then care can move along the continuum in which the need increases, and that might include physical care, which would include dressing, bathing, shaving, hair care, etc. It's common for caregivers to provide transportation, to provide emotional support with decision making and finding additional resources. And so in other words, providing for physical and or emotional needs of another person. So what are the benefits and challenges of caregiving? I will say that we would typically during this presentation, and I've been skipping over some of these, in this presentation we would typically break out into small groups, whether they were breakout rooms if we're doing this virtually, or in small groups if we were in person. Because we have such a small audience today, we're not going to do that. So I am just going to go over some of this information. But when we talk about caregiving, you know, here are some of the have you experienced any of these caregiving challenges? One of the challenges is even recognizing that you might be a caregiver. Again, because that is so frequently overlooked. Understanding of the care receiver's health, being knowledgeable about their conditions and their diseases, being knowledgeable of community resources. And at this point, I'm going to reference also Senior Linkage Line, as well as minnesotahelp.info are both great resources. A challenge can be the ability to locate services and resources to meet the needs and goals, and asking for help before it's too late. One of the things that I hear frequently, and that is that individuals, the start of caregiving can be just really maybe something very kind and thoughtful. But as the needs of the individual, of the care recipient change, the caregiver kind of goes along with that and steps up the services that they provide. And we are talking about informal caregivers here. Again, we're not talking about paid caregivers. I think it's, you know, I liken it to when I got my first pair of glasses, and I could not believe that I could see how defined the leaves in the trees were, because I had been without my glasses for long enough that I didn't even know that I could not see that. I'm going to say that something very similar can happen with caregiving. It's a process, and we don't always recognize how gradually that service that we provide becomes increasingly more demanding of our time. What we have found is that asking for help and the right kind of help can often happen very late, and that's unfortunate. There are services to explore very early on in the caregiving process. Some of that is very proactive in having a plan, which we would encourage. So then going back to the list, you know, it can be challenging to communicate about difficult topics. Those topics might include, do you have a power of attorney? Do you have an advance directive? Who do you have as your emergency contacts through with your doctor, with your clinic, and with the hospital. And I'm going to add to that also and say, and who is the emergency backup to your emergency contact? Because if we're looking at an older couple in which they each are the other's emergency contact, but something happens to the emergency contact, that's kind of a difficult situation. So really, it's always good to have the primary contact as well as a backup emergency contact. Frequently, caregivers have engaged in negative self-talk. Can be challenging to maintain, take time to maintain one's mental health. It can be challenging to ask for and accept help. And we certainly see that with the individuals that we've worked with. Our Title IIIe caregiver providers have talked about that frequently. If we consider that most of the area that MNRAA covers, most of the counties are quite rural. Rural areas have a strong sense of self-sufficiency and that they can do that on their own. And sometimes that makes it more challenging to not only educate them about resources, but to help them see the benefits of accessing resources. And then there's the challenge of maintaining good work-life balance. And work-life balance isn't all about employment. Work-life balance can be about the work of caregiving and maintaining that imbalance with an individual's well-being, life focus and balance also. And then feeling that need to take care of my own. That can really be a very strong one. And I think, in this case, this might be in a later slide, but I'm going to share it now. And that feeling of needing to take care of my own is that sense of obligation. And language that I heard from my predecessor, and it was wonderful language, so I really enjoy sharing it. And that is called fog. And fog is easy to remember, and it's something very commonly experienced by caregivers. And that is that there's a sense of fear with not knowing what's going to happen. What is the course of this individual's, of the care recipient's health condition? What kind of course is that going to take? And so then we can go back to understanding the care receiver's health condition and diseases. The more informed we are about that, that will help to decrease that sense of fear. Then we have that sense of obligation. And that is that this is my mom. She took care of me. She raised me. I am responsible for taking care of her. And that can sometimes exceed a good balance to the point that she's my mom and I need to do this. And that may result in failure to reach out and get support from others for that caregiving also. And then the final letter of fog is G, and G stands for guilt. What is the guilt that an individual caregiver might feel about the care recipient? It might be because it was a contentious relationship prior to the illness. It can be guilt at not being able to fully care for the care recipient. And again, I'll use a personal example and say that when we were caring for my mother at end of life, my sister would come home for 1 week a month. She lives out of state. And I just wouldn't show up at my mom's during that week. And I was feeling guilty about that. And I had to say that to my sister. I'm sorry that when you show up, I'm just gone. Because that was my guilt. And my sister had the perfect response. And that was, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. I come here for a week. It gives the rest of you siblings all a break. The other side of that it gave my sister also was her own time with my mother. So, important to consider what all those dynamics are. Let's talk about the benefits of accessing supports and services. I'm going to ask if I could just get one comment from someone here about what you see as a benefit of accessing supports and resources. Mary, can one of the Marys help us out here?
I think it's, well, it not only benefits the caregiver and gives them a break, but it also benefits the person with the illness, whatever that is, because it gets them used to accepting help from someone else. And I always think that's very important because you never know what will happen down the line.
Yes, that is a great response. And you know, I know that sometimes that's a slow process. It might be introducing a homemaker into the home. And I have, you know, I've heard of examples in which it just started out with the caregiver, the care receiver, and the homemaker having coffee a couple of times, during which the care recipient became more comfortable with that individual and was then, with that familiarity, willing to accept that support. And that can be a great strategy. And it is supportive of both the caregiver and the care recipient. I'm going to say that I think too many times care recipients become really very isolated by nature of their illness. And I have a long-standing belief that no one person can meet all of our emotional needs. And if it was always my mom and myself, we would have to really work at finding something to talk about. But when my brother came in for his day of caregiving, yeah, it really, you know, it's like, oh, Perry's here. And Perry works in an entirely different world than I do. He's got many different experiences. And so it was much more stimulating from a conversation perspective. The same thing can happen with hiring services as well. Now we're going to talk about what some of the barriers are to accessing supports. Some of those barriers really are, we may encounter, and we might encounter resistance on the part of the individual who is needing services. I think of an example that our community living support staff specialists have talked about, and that is that, for example, the older gentleman might say, and has shared real life example, well, I don't really need any help because my wife takes care of me. She takes care of everything that I need. He may not recognize, it may not be recognized that the spouse is exhausted and the spouse can't really continue to maintain their health without accepting some supports. And I think, you know, communication is a really important conversation when we get to barriers about accessing supports. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, resistance is always about something. We cannot just use it as a word, but what is that resistance about? And, you know, it might be about fear of having somebody new taking care of me. Are they gonna treat me kindly? And those barriers, actually, I'm going to say, that kind of barrier can happen on both the part of the care receiver and the care recipient. That fear of how vulnerable is this individual, and I want to make sure that they're safe. Caregivers may feel guilty about asking for help. Again, that sense of, this is my responsibility. I'm the one who needs to be taking care of my family or my neighbor lady who has no one but me. And I don't think there's any intent to be a martyr, but no caregiver needs to be the martyr to the extent that it really starts to compromise their own health. So really want to encourage and support caregivers in their ability to access other services. The other thing that we want to be aware of as well is potentially caregivers are employed. And an employed caregiver has responsibilities. What we know is that many caregivers are employed in some capacity. And while I'm not going to share statistics, what I will say is that we know that employment is often compromised, particularly by women. because they need to either reduce their hours if that's an option, or they may need to leave the workforce entirely to meet the demands of caregiving for their family member. So that can be really quite challenging. We also know that it's challenging to care for somebody, can be to varying degrees challenging for somebody who has a diagnosis of dementia, and that would have implications for also getting support. We also want to really say that it's important to reach out, important to reach out and access services and supports in advance of a crisis. And that's a part of having a good planning process in place. And the Senior Linkage Line is an excellent resource for reaching out. They can direct individuals to caregiver consultants. Mary, can you help me with the right language? Caregiver consultant, caregiver coach. Remind me what your title is. I know that one of those.
It started out as caregiver coach, and now I think it is caregiver consultant.
Caregiver consultant. There were some legal issues with the language. So caregiver consultant, and the Senior Linkage Line can help you to identify a caregiver consultant who will help also with putting together some planning pieces. And I've always been a believer in having plan A, B, and C, because we just never know what we're going to need. And crises are much more smoothly handled when there's been a plan in place. There are an array of supportive services that we want to talk about here, and they include anything from adult day services, which is a form of respite. Respite being defined as a time of rest from those caregiving responsibilities. Adult day services, to have somebody come in and do chores or some light housekeeping can be very helpful for the individual to remain in their home, but also be supportive of the caregiver. There are companion programs which help to kind of shake up what that social interaction piece is. Caregiver support groups and caregiver coaching. We might need to change that language, I see. Family meetings. And then there's a program also really that is quite helpful, and it's called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. In this case, I believe that Vine has recently had a couple of employees trained in that. So that's a go-to for you. But in accessing any of these resources, Senior Linkage Line can help you identify resources in your area. We have dementia networks. YourJuniper.org has a number of evidence-based classes that are very supportive of caregivers and their health. A home delivered meal, home modifications are of great significance with regard to health and safety for individuals who choose to remain in their home, which is the case for most individuals. There are personal home and home health care providers, respite care, transportation services, and veterans benefits. There's some evidence-based caregiving support resources also that we wanted to reference. Again, if you're looking for more information, you can check with, you can ask Vine about that, but you can always call the Senior Linkage Line. There's the REST program, which is Respite Education and Support Tools. There is the REACH program, which is Resources for Enhancing Alzheimer's Caregiver Health. Powerful Tools for Caregivers that I referenced, and then caregiver consulting. I'm going to also add that there's the PEARLS program, and the PEARLS program is a new program also that Vine is currently being trained in, and that has a stronger focus on the mental health of individuals. So that'll be a great resource also to our community. Respite Care provides a temporary respite from caregiving to strengthen the caregiver's ability to continue with caregiving. And we're just going to identify that respite care can be provided through volunteer visitor programs, weekly respite services, memory cafes, again, adult day services, shorter long-term stays in assisted livings, services such as chores, and you're just going to keep hearing about Senior Linkage Line. We have that embedded as a terrific resource throughout our presentation here. The other thing, and I referenced this earlier, is what if there is a crisis? There is available help for crisis planning in a case where the caregiver experiences an illness or injury. And it's important to identify who the emergency contact is if that caregiver becomes ill or injured. I'm going to do a quick reference to the Federal Care Act here. And the Federal Care Act requires that hospitals, when an individual is hospitalized, advise of the opportunity to identify someone as a caregiver, record the caregiver's contact information, and enable caregivers by providing notice, consultation, planning, and instructions for how to provide that caregiving when the individual is discharged from the hospital. And then we have a link here through AARP. I'm going to share with you, Mike, if you would like, I can make a copy of these links and forward that to you if anyone is interested in receiving those.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. And then we have additional resources, one's not so additional. I've referenced two of these, the Senior Linkage Line and the telephone number, Minnesota Help, which is a website that is can also chat with you, and then our Minnesota River Area Caregivers support. At this point, I'm going to turn our presentation over to Brittany Johnson with the Senior Linkage Line.
Hello. So I'm going to request control from you, Kelly. That way I can navigate the slides.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. So I will be talking about the Senior Linkage Line, as Kelly mentioned. I want to start off by explaining that the Senior Linkage Line is a free service offered by the state of Minnesota, helping older adults and their families find community services or plan for their future. The Senior Linkage Line can help in numerous different ways, as Kelly mentioned throughout this presentation. But a few more specific examples is if you have questions or concerns about long-term care options, fraud, applications or forms that you receive in the mail, housing options or prescription drug expenses. In addition, the Senior Linkage Line is the federally designated state health insurance assistance program in Minnesota. So what that means is that we provide comprehensive and non-biased health insurance counseling. We assist Medicare beneficiaries compare plans objectively, assist newly retired individuals understand their health insurance options, and have several resources to send either through email or mail. Kelly, if you want to go to the next screen, that would be great. We typically assist individuals over the phone, but we also have help available online at the minnesotahelp.info. This is a great resource for individuals. People can chat with a specialist if they prefer to have an online communication. Otherwise, if you want to do a search yourself, they have a really great search filtered system that you can use. Pre-pandemic, we also had in-person assistance available. We are beginning to offer virtual classes and presentations such as this one. So if you're interested in learning about upcoming classes and presentations, you can call the Senior Linkage Line on our main phone number, or otherwise if you visit MNRAA.org/calendar, it's going to give you the most accurate information on upcoming presentations and classes. And then for printed materials, we do have numerous different options. So a few that we have are going to be listed on the slide here. So the first one is our Planning Ahead booklet, which is a phenomenal resource. This is a guide that helps provide information to consider as we age. So I know that I just referenced it on a call earlier that I had today about someone who's planning ahead. This is going to provide information and tips on what kind of information they're going to need, whether it be about power of attorney or a living will, things like that. Medicare 101 is another resource that we offer. And this is going to give you the basics about Medicare. So we have a bigger kind of version of this. It's called Healthcare Choices. But for people who are new to Medicare, that really don't have a lot of information about Medicare, the Medicare 101 book is going to be a phenomenal resource to start them and point them in the right direction. Healthcare Choices is what's next. This is going to be definitely more in depth, and this is specifically for Minnesotans on Medicare. So a lot of Medicare beneficiaries, especially folks that are new to Medicare, are going to get the Medicare New Book, which is a federal document or a federal resource. The Healthcare Choices kind of hones in on Minnesotans. There is an online version of this at mnhealthcarechoices.com if people would like to have that available to them immediately. Otherwise, you can call Senior Linkage Line and we can help you get a hard copy mailed to you. And then a few additional ones are the Senior Linkage Line kiosk cards. And these are just a great description on general information on how we can help you. So it has housing resources, health insurance, financial assistance, community supports, and legal assistance we can provide. Again, non-biased options for community resources. And then on the flip side, it has information about our website, www.minnesotahealth.info, which again, you can find services in your area. And then lastly, we do have a magnet with our partners, Veterans Linkage Line and the Disability Hub, which has their phone numbers and offers, again, phenomenal resources for veterans and folks that have a disability.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Oh, I have a question. Brittany, could
Yeah.
you send me some of the Medicare 101 and the Healthcare Choices books, as well as the
Absolutely. Mary, how many do you want?
a stack.
Okay.
I give them out regularly.
Awesome. I can do that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things that we would be remiss about not referencing, and that is caregiving for older adults who are very much a part of our culture. The Minnesota Board on Aging, in partnership with the area agencies on aging and Twin Cities Public Television, TPT, has developed a video on caregiving, a part of our culture, to raise awareness of caregiving and offer tips and resources for various ethnic and new immigrant caregivers. So we do have that link here as well, which I'll forward to you, Mike. And these video clips, the nice thing about them is that they're available in multiple languages, including Somali, Spanish, Hmong, Khmer, and English. So one of the questions that we have for you is a request for how you can help us, and that is, what services are missing and who do you know? If you have suggestions and ideas for how else we can share our presentation, please feel free to let us know. We appreciate the opportunity to offer this through Vine. We're very grateful for that and being able to get the word out there. In summary, what we have done today is defined caregiving, hopefully increased the understanding about the value of caregiving, benefits and resources that support caregiving, and very importantly, learning how to access resources that support caregiving. You can stay connected with us through MNRAA. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and if you so choose, you can sign up for our newsletter. We always encourage that if you have any interest in being a volunteer, and again, referencing that Minnesota is a really great volunteer state, and there's a lot of life to be lived beyond retirement, whatever age that occurs at, to still maintain a sense of purpose. So we always welcome somebody who's interested in being a volunteer for MNRAA. And then our website is MNRAA.org. On that note, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. Any questions for us today? I know we have a small group here, but any question is great.
Kelly, do you know of this? I think this frequently changes. Who offers respite care for long periods of time in town here?
I will share with you. That is a great question. And of course, it tings in my mind when I referenced that as a resource earlier. I will say that I do not know of anyone who does that long-term, short-term even, or long-term. It's a definite need for respite. There are family caregivers who they want to go away for the weekend or take a vacation, and their family member or the care recipient just may not, they may not want to leave their home. They may be comfortable where they're at. So I will say, yes.
I know that Monarch Meadows will do short-term respite. I don't know if they have a if they have a minimum. I don't think so. I think that they will do like a weekend, but that's the only place that I've known and I've had caregivers utilize.
And have you been able to access that as a resource during COVID?
No, I haven't.
Yes. So that, that also has been a more challenging variable. I think that what we run into is that the folks who best know how to provide respite, short-term or long-term, when it includes overnights, are residential programs, such as assisted livings or independent livings that maintain an apartment for that purpose. And it's always about supply and demand. And as long as those assisted livings, in the opportunities I've had to speak with them about this very issue, they can make more. There is as much paperwork for them to do on an individual who's coming to stay short term as there is for long term. So that becomes a deterrent. And reimbursement is sometimes a deterrent. Can be a challenge for individuals who are in waiver programs as well, because it's a level of expense that may not fit into their budget. I will share that any opportunity that I get, however, with assisted livings, is I do have that conversation. I do make the need known. And, my understanding is that occupancy rates in assisted livings right now are down. There's an increased impetus beyond COVID, pre-COVID and beyond COVID, to help people remain in their homes with the appropriate supports. So maybe at some point in the future, we will have greater access to that residential support. And I will share also that one of the things as a program developer that I promote is a state grant called the Live Well at Home grant. And I have had that conversation with a couple of assisted livings about the potential of applying for that grant with the purpose of funding a couple of respite beds in an assisted living, to maybe develop a better sense of how that might be a service that could be provided on an ongoing basis. That's a great question, Mary. It's a great need.
Also, I'd like to add about Monarch Meadows that what I was told by caregivers was they would go with them because they would waive that $1,000, $1,200 assessment fee. Wants to go just for a weekend or for a short period of time, and they have to pay the daily rate anyway. Add that, $1,200 on top of that, that makes it really difficult.
It does. And I think, it's been a couple of years now, but I think, even from a waiver perspective, it was almost $100 a day, which eats up the waiver budget very, very quickly. And potentially in a particular case, it would reduce the availability of funds for adult day services during other days. So the caregiver chose to not go away for the long weekend, which was unfortunate because caregivers deserve that break. So it is definitely a gap in services. Yep, definitely. Any other questions or comments?
I was just
So,
going
yes, no,
gonna
go
mention-
ahead, Mike.
one of the great services that Senior Linkage Line provides for Vine is every year, right around November 1st, we try to have Robin Thompson in to talk about upcoming changes in Medicare. And while not directly a caregiver issue, I'm sure there are many caregivers who go through that process with the care receiver. So that's something, those are the types of additional services that Senior Linkage Line provides, which has got to be invaluable for caregivers.
Yes, and I will say that having also been a waiver case manager for Nicollet County, the intricacies of trying to sort out resources can be really challenging. And so even as a waiver case manager, Senior Linkage Line was a definite go-to resource for us. They're very knowledgeable, very skilled of resources. So appreciate your sharing that. So on that note, from MNRAA's perspective, I'm going to thank you all for participating, and any future questions that you have about resources, please feel free to contact us at Minnesota River Area Agency on Aging, or to directly contact the Senior Linkage Line. Thank you for having us, Mike.
Yes, thank you very much. And of
you.
course, if those two resources are, if you're forgetting names or anything, always contact Vine, and we have regular direct contact with both of those resource people as well. So don't let that keep you from calling us as well.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Brittany.
Yes,
All right. Have a great day.
you as well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey.